I was so rudely interrupted and I don't know why. So they need to take other cells over before anything else can happen. If you take microbio, advanced microbio, anything like that, one of the most common viruses you're going to run into is the T4 bacteriophage, and that's because that infects E. coli and the aquaporins, and what they do is take over the host's DNA or RNA replication machinery and just make more of themselves, and they split themselves out. It looks like little spider legs with this weird diamond 3D shape head. Yeah, viruses are not considered living because they can't reproduce themselves. So there's always a great debate between it, but they don't really grow without anybody and they can't reproduce without anybody. So they're not alive. So for people, there are two main types of influenza virus, type A and B. A and B, they spread throughout people a lot, and they also mutate a lot. These guys are the ones that are responsible for the epidemics every year. And that brings us into epidemic versus pandemic. An epidemic is locally contained, so think of like an epidural, right? It's the top of the skin. You know, it's superficial to an extent. I had another great epi word that I used and I can't think of it, but it's localized, right? It's superficial, epidemic, epidural, epidermis. So like the measles outbreak was an epidemic because that only occurred in that small Jewish area where people were not vaccinating their children. We didn't see measles popping up in, you know, Canada or Mexico or South America. Whereas this, because it started in China, right? Or would it be that way for you guys? Whatever. It came over to the US, is in Italy, is in so many other, I think it's like 214 countries or something. Was it 200? I can't remember. I don't have those facts here, but I had them in my other video. So yeah, an epidemic is localized, a pandemic is everywhere. That is worldwide. Influenza A viruses are found in many different animals. This includes ducks, chickens, whales, pigs, horses, seals, cats. People don't typically have to respond to influenza A viruses. Like, if your cat is sick, you're most likely not going to get sick because that cat's sickness is confined to that cat. So there's no need for the people, our bodies, our immune system to know what a cat virus looks like because it doesn't have the proper protein receptors and signaling channels on it to go and infect a human, right? We have influenza B that pretty much is only confined to us. So if you have the flu, your dog's not really going to get the flu because there's no lock and key mechanism there with our flu and the dog's cells. So influenza A have two subtypes, the H and the N. So H and N, if that reminds you of the H1N1, right? H1N1 was a great example of a mutation called a shift, where the two different types of viruses came together to produce this new subtype of virus that was much more lethal and much more infectious because our bodies couldn't understand that it wasn't just H and it wasn't just N, it was both of them, and we couldn't figure out how to fight it off. Yeah. The bird flu outbreak in 2009, viruses like to mutate. They do the shift where two of them come together, and you have the bird flu type of virus, right? Where it's like, all right, cool, it's a bird, we don't need to figure it out. And then it comes along with the human type virus, and they're both like, hey, let's link up, let's do this thing. So now you have this new novel, right? Great word, virus, where it's able to infect us because it has the human subtype, but our bodies can't see it because it has the bird subtype. So it's like, hey, I'm going to get you guys, but you have no idea who I am, and I'm just going to continually get you. And that's sort of kind of what's happening here with the coronavirus. The more small-scale mutation is called the antigenic drift, and this is just more common. You can create your own niche little phylogenetic trees with these guys. These are the mutations that happen during reproduction they're just like, hey, this T is going to change to an A, or this C is going to change to a G, and you're going to get this and get that. And this is what typically happens with the flu, and why the natural flu, the regular flu that we get vaccinated for every year, that's why those sort of age out, because the flu viruses, they're just like, hey, let's change because that's what we like to do, and we're one single RNA strand, and we're just so unstable, we're just gonna flip things around, and that's what happens. Yes, so I have that. I was going to talk more about Ebola. So I was speaking about the bird flu in 2009, right? According to what I found, just kidding, I don't have numbers. But I do have numbers for the Spanish influenza, which was also a type of bird flu. This similar thing happened in 1918, and there was 1/3 of the world's population became infected, and there is at least 50 million people worldwide who died. And there were 675 people in the United States alone that died in 1918 with the Spanish influenza. That's one of the more biggest and well-known outbreaks. That was much more deadly, much more scary. People were just going left and right. Another big one that was fairly recent, I think it was 2013 to 14 was the last big one that we had, was Ebola. And that was not a pandemic because not everybody got Ebola. If it had gotten to pandemic levels, most of you guys, including myself, would not be sitting here today because of how deadly it was. It had about a 90% mortality rate, and that is absolutely terrifying. So 9 in 10 people died once they became infected with it. This occurred because the Ebola virus, I took advanced microbiome, and there were 7 coding proteins in the genome of Ebola, and I had to memorize all of them. And I think 5 or 6 of them, if I remember correctly, were specific for extracellular matrix adhesion, so that's getting onto the cells, and then they were also cross-linked with lysing. So that's why, if you guys know anything about the Ebola virus, people would literally be bleeding out of every orifice: their eyes, their ears, their noses, their mouths, their private areas, their genitalia, anything. Wherever blood could escape, it would escape, and they would just bleed out and die of dehydration. And it was when people came into contact with bodily fluids. So that was an epidemic, and that killed 90% of the people that it came in contact with. That is something to truly be scared about. That also occurred, I believe, from fruit bats. There's that shift of fruit bats having this virus and people, just carrying around these things. You don't even have to be ill. You can just have them on you. We have bacteria and viruses all over us and within us, and we just become that caveat, and bam, that's it. You're creating a new superbug. So this year, coronavirus is labeled COVID-19. As of right now, I checked these last night. I believe this has risen by 1 more infection actually in Nassau County, which is a little scary just because it's close to home, but we'll talk more about that later. There are 80 total cases, 81, and 9 total deaths. There are 13 states reporting cases. If you look at it, that's nothing. There was just the tornado, in Tennessee, and I think 7 people died. I'm not trying to lessen anybody's death. I'm not trying to lessen any family's loss. I am not trying to say that this isn't something serious and that it should be taken lightly. However, I am saying that this specific virus has a mortality rate of about 3%. When I last did the math, it was 3.409%. Percentages aren't really good to go off of because it's a percent of what? It's a percent of 88,000 the last time I checked, or the last time I heard. That also is not very much when we're talking about 50 million people becoming infected in 1918, and that was when the world was smaller too. Smaller meaning, the GOP was down. We didn't have as many people inhabiting it, sorry. So I want to continue and say that globally, 1/3 of heart disease is attributed to high cholesterol, right? In the United States, high cholesterol is estimated to cause 2.6 million deaths, right? And 29.7 million disabilities because of high cholesterol. With that, in the United States, heart disease is the number 1 killer, causing 2.6 million deaths. Oh, wait, I read that wrong. I'm sorry. 25% of deaths in the United States, 1 in 4, 1 person dying every 37 seconds. That's heart disease. Why are we not freaking out about high cholesterol and heart disease? And why are we not actively changing things, Here comes this little itty bitty, jerky mutant DNA vessel trying to inject anything and everything with it. Why are we freaking out about that and we're not actively freaking out about this? If you're still able to go to 7-Eleven or wherever, Wawa, and pick up 3 Slurpees, you know what I mean? I don't think a lot of you guys will like this answer, but it's foreign. We're scared. If you look at this particular political regime that we're currently under in the United States, we don't like China. Look at the horrible tax embargoes that we've had to deal with and the trade embargoes and things like that. It's foreign. It's scary. I think it's genuinely scary how far it has traveled and how quickly it has traveled. I wasn't nervous about it until I heard today while I was in jury duty that there's 1 case in Nassau County. I work on the border of Suffolk County and Nassau County. So it's scary because not that it's deadly, but it's just that I can get it. But the same implications go for anything, If you go around licking doorknobs, you're going to pick up something, This has caused a lot of xenophobia. I will say, however, there is some righteousness or something right for us to be afraid of it. Both times with the bird flu and right now, China has not openly or correctly or quickly given information needed for those infected and the death toll. So that is something that is of concern, but it's really not that horrible. People are afraid. We're afraid of how far and how fast it's come. People are getting infected, and that's what it is coming down to. It's a lot. People, the CDC has this entire page about the stigma created by the coronavirus, where I had a tweet actually where this girl who was Asian was on the New York City subway, and there was this white woman sitting across from her with her scarf all like this over her face. The girl pretended to cough, the Asian girl, deemed to be Chinese, of course. She went, and the woman freaked out, said something probably racist and disgusting under her breath, and walked off the train. And that's disgusting. I'm hearing people, my jurors, my colleagues in jury duty, talking about videos of people being splashed with water. Asian Americans. Just because you're Asian does not mean that you have the virus. Just because you're an Asian American does not mean that you carry the virus. There's nothing to be afraid about from anybody in Asia. Should you be going to China? Why not? Really, you shouldn't. But, it's a virus. It's not as bad as the common flu. It is what it is. It's scary because of the implications it causes. So if you step back and you look at it from like an epidemiologist's point of view, right? It's scary how quickly it has traveled from continent to continent, but that's also how the Black Plague was. If people weren't actively traveling, they wouldn't have been there to have the rats on board that had the fleas, that had the Black Plague that infected two-thirds and killed 2/3 of Europe, you know? It wasn't worldwide because it was basically all in Europe. Spain didn't get affected by the Black Plague, you know, the Black Death. So it's just sort of an eye-opener for people whose lives revolve around travel, you know, air stewardesses, pilots, traveling businessmen and women. And really what you guys just need to do is tell everyone that it's really nothing to really be concerned about unless you are immunocompromised, unless you are elderly or a child. But those are always the first people to go in any source of breakout or epidemic or pandemic. Let me see what else I was gonna say. Yeah, there's also some very scary misinformation that I've heard, even from jurors. You know, I was told that she told me specifically, I don't think she knew that I knew this much about it. She said that half of the people who got infected with coronavirus have died. And I was like, you're joking me right now. I literally said, no, let's do the math. And that's when I got the 3.409%. You guys can look up the CDC. They're going to tell you what to do. And really, it's wash your hands. The masks are irrelevant. They're not going to help you. They're not going to hurt you. Use hand wipes instead of hand sanitizer, excuse me. I prefer that. People are also going crazy. Use paper towels. Do not use those bathroom air ones because they're dirty to begin with, number one. And number two, if it's in the air, it's just going to spread it more ferociously in the air. It's going to be there, you know. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of to tell you guys. I'm sorry it seems very impromptu. My MacBook isn't cooperating. And I hope that I gave you guys information about this and that I answered any questions that you had. I hope to have made you feel more reassured and not as scared. And yeah, please look up everything on the CDC. Everything is there. That's where I got all my information. You can look up past epidemics, past pandemics. You can learn more yourself. And that's what it boils down to. Wash your hands.